Now, October has been a rather sobering month for so many involved with folk music in Scotland. First with the passing of Ian Hardy, and now with the premature departing of Michael Marra, a man consistently described by the press as one of Scotland's hidden gems, but to everyone in the world of theatre and Scottish music, a truly valued and inspirational character and in no way hidden. I met Michael whilst working on Christine Hanson's cremation of Sam McGee, and he was an absolute revelation, a man who took time to make sure he found out who he was working with, spent time with each and every member of that tour, and made a very personal connection. It was a short tour, but one in which has left me with memories of a lovely man with a razor-sharp wit and a continually inquiring mind. Tonight on Travelling Folk, we're going to pay tribute to him and hear from others who worked with him and were touched by his genius. First, though, I'm going to read you a wee extract of a very fine post by Leslie Riddoch, journalist and friend to Michael. Dundee has lost its bard, and Scotland has lost one of the few people who ever really understood it. Kindness, squalor, hilarity, warts and all. I realise exaggeration is common these days, yet in the long drive down from Skye to Perthshire tonight, I've thought a lot about Michael's talent and his huge legacy of songs. He was also a great painter and cartoonist, and realised that, like Robert Burns, Mike was driven by compassion, humanitarianism and a deep-seated fury at cruelty, whether that was the callous cruelty of war or the cruelty of men towards women. In a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by Karine Polwart, Sheena Wellington, Liz Lochhead and Jemima Levick to reflect over the man, his work and his life. But first, let's hear Michael Marra and Letter from Perth.
We will bathe in the sunlight. We will howl at the moon. I want to talk to the trees. Check out the smell of the blossoms and the bloom. I want to dance with you, baby. Spend my time in a constructive way. Hold you close while I tell you that I love you, the way I will until my dying day. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I can see it peeking through. Big light must shine on someone, may as well be me and you. I would rock in your sweet and tender arms if I wasn't doing time. I have to get this message to you, baby. It's a beautiful day and I feel fine. I have some paper and a pen. I have precious words to say. I decided not to kill myself now. I feel fine, it's a beautiful day. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I can see it peeking through. Big light must shine on someone, may as well be me and you, baby, me and you. Tender arms if I wasn't doing time. I have to get this message to you, baby. It's a beautiful day and I feel fine. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I can see it peeking through. Big light must shine on someone, may as well be me and you. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, I can see it peeking through. Big light must shine on someone, may as well be me and you, baby, me and you.
Michael Marra there from the album Posted Sober. And here on Travelling Folk we have Jemima Levick from the Dundee Rep, Liz Lochhead, Sheena Wellington and Karine Polwart. Karine, if I can start with you, where did you first meet Michael and what was your first impressions of the man?
Actually, I met him long after I first ever heard him or saw him play, because for most of my life my relationship with Michael Marra was just as a total fan.
Yeah.
And I heard his music first 20 years ago exactly. It was 1992 and I was living in Dundee, and it was an old boyfriend gave me a mixtape that had Michael Marra on it, and I couldn't believe I was living right down just off the Perth Road in Dundee, and I couldn't believe that there was this man that was writing about spots that were just round the corner from where I was living, and writing in amazing language and like nobody else I'd ever heard before. And it would be probably at least another 10 years, I think, before I actually met him. I mean, I saw him play in clubs and festivals in all manner of places, and I had his albums and I was a little bit daunted by him. And then when I finally met him, I think the first time I properly talked to him was on a show. It was at Perth Concert Hall, and we were both working with Concerto Caledonia. It was an early music ensemble. That's probably the first time I had a conversation with him. And he's done economical with his words.
Yes.
But he was so generous. I think that's this thing. He was so generous with he was encouraging, he was wry, and his face had that wee look where one eyebrow's kind of always up the whole time. And he was just, interested to know who you were and what you were about, and generous with his time. So, and he was exactly like you'd imagine he was if you went to see him play and heard him talk. There was no artifice in that, if you know what I mean. He was just like that.
Yeah, Liz, how about yourself? When did you come to meet the man?
I think it's 20 plus years ago. I was trying to work out when, but I remember exactly when it was. It was in the Chandler studio of the RSAMD, as it then was, and he was in a show called A Wee Home from Home. Well, it was 25 years ago. I can work it out because it was not long after Mary Queen of Scots got her head chopped off, and I'd met this wonderful dancer in that called Frank McConnell. And Frank McConnell, the day he finished Mary Queen of Scots, was going into rehearsal with a guy called Michael Marra that I'd heard of, making a show called A Wee Home from Home. And that's the show in which Mother Glasgow, the best Glasgow anthem, was written by Michael Marra, a Dundee man. But anyway, the first time I saw him on stage, it was scary. I mean, it was a very scary wee dance show about somebody coming back to their former life. And both Frank and Michael, they just meshed together. And it was the most wonderful thing. And Frank was saying at Michael's funeral the other day that he remembers me coming in to the dressing room blazing with love for the whole wonderful, theatrical, beautiful, generous event that this thing had been with the great Michael Marra. And I've been lucky enough to know him ever since, and to very occasionally work with him. And he changes the way you work and the way you think about your whole life.
Sheena, growing up where he did that make him the artist and the writer and the worker? Was the place so important to him that formed him?
Oh, I think very much so, because he grew up in Clement Park as I did, and of course my memories of Michael were originally when we used to chap on the door of the Marrow household and ask Mrs. Marrow if we could take the bairn out. But and if we had a clean face, clean hands and a clean hanky, sometimes we got to. So we used to give a wee huddle along. And then later, of course, we took Christopher out. And I think, yes, Lochie, Clement Park, which was a close community. It was a place where everybody knew their neighbours. And the family itself, which had a strong faith and an ethic and a working class decency, which Michael grew up with. And the thing that was Michael for me was he knew what was right, what was wrong, and in the middle was compassion. And I think that very much came from his background.
Yeah, the writing and his language, Karine, that was something that appealed to you, obviously. What made it so appealing?
I think he wasn't at all afraid to sing exactly as he spoke, and he was clear that to talk about particular places and all the rest of it was not to alienate people, it was to draw people in and speak to people even if they weren't from where you were. And I think sometimes in songwriting people confuse universality with bland generality, and they're completely at odds with each other.
Oh, absolutely.
And he was just like this supreme. Like, I can't actually think of anybody better at the particularity and the turn of phrase. And there's a beautiful story. The guy that used to be the head of music at the Scottish Arts Council, Nod Knowles, who was a fabulous man. He's one of the world's biggest Michael Marra fans, and a friend of Michael's as well. Booked him for a big corporate event down in Bath. It was corporate funders and high arts, high hegions at arts and stuff like that. And, the temptation would have been to book somebody safe and, easy listening, and he booked Michael Marra and he blew the room apart. And he was delighted. He was delighted that he'd to have the courage of your convictions, that you'll speak to people because you speak about who you are and where you're from.
Yeah. Liz, I mentioned, that phrase that I keep reading in the newspapers, that, he was a hidden gem. But to so many people who were involved in music and theatre, he wasn't at all. And it's slightly frustrating that phrase keeps being used, isn't it?
Well, it's frustrating because of the structures, the cultural structures we have in this country just now. But this is not the time to talk about that. The time is to celebrate that Michael burst through all that stuff, and he was completely central to Scottish culture, to literature and poetry, as well as to music, and certainly to theatre. I mean, so many of us who worked in theatre, he had this generosity and openness that he would take on a project if it appealed to him. He wasn't fierce, and he would just join in, and he would... I got an email last week from my young friend Daniel Jackson, the hottest young playwright in Scotland, and he's in New York just now, but he sent me an email saying that he used to be the usher at the theatre when Michael and I had done a wee show 11 years ago, just after 9/11, I remember it was, we were rehearsing. It was a Beauty and the Beast with a Scottish flavour, and it was just a beautiful wee show, and Michael wrote all these wonderful songs for it, and Daniel Jackson said, I can still hear these songs. No, I can still sing these songs. And he wasn't a secret among practitioners of arts of all sorts in Scotland. He was absolutely central to us. He was an absolute one-off. And from that wonderful local thing that both Sheena and Karine have celebrated absolutely rightly, he did go right out into the universal. If there was somebody who really communicated and did not believe in barriers, that was Michael.
Yeah, we're going to speak more about his work with the theatre, with Jemima, in just a few minutes. But Karine, the song that you've selected here, one of Michael's works, can you tell us what it is and why?
I've picked Frida Kahlo's Visit to the Tay Bridge Bar. And I know that Frida Kahlo was one of Michael's favourite artists, and actually one of mine. I had an amazing experience of going to the first ever time her work was exhibited outside of Mexico was in Hamburg, and I went to it and it just blew me away. It's just incredibly moving work, and I think it's that thing about, she was as a person, she was abused by her partner Diego Rivera. She suffered a lot of torment and pain in her life and made these beautiful things, out of it. And there's just something gorgeous about her appearing in this Manny's drinking den in Dundee, and that just being a thing where they show great compassion for her. And there's this beautiful line where it's like, Buenos dias, boys, this looks like the place to make my re-entry to the human race. And it simultaneously dignifies her and her life and the men that are drinking at the bar. It's just, I think it's an absolute piece of genius.
Wow.
Let's have a listen to this. This is Michael Marra and Frida Kahlo's Visit to the Tay Bridge Bar.
We were all flooded with a scarlet light. Came through the window with the rain outside. All went quiet, vision appeared, with a rose in her hair and a ring in her ear. And she said, Buenos dias, boys, this looks like the place. Make my re-entry to the human race. Here I'll stay till it's hasta la vista, and I'm on my way. And Vince said she was a woman to whom life had been cruel, and she lived with a fat man in the naive school. He liked his beer and he put it about. She truly loved him till the lights went out, and then she made her way up to the pearly gates. She saw bar. There'll be no more lies, no more tears, no more listening through the fat man's ears. There'll be no more tears and no more lies, no more looking through the fat man's eyes. She said she'd never been so happy in a long, long time, and her mind was relaxed and her body felt fine. She said, put on Perdido, tonight's the night. I want to dance with Jimmy Howie in the pale moonlight. There'll be no more lies, no more tears, no more listening through the fat man's ears. There'll be no more tears and no more lies, no more looking through the fat man's eyes. We were all flooded with a scarlet light.
You're listening to Travelling Folk here on BBC Radio Scotland, where we're celebrating the life of Michael Marra. Sheena, you could never say that Michael was really fixed in any kind of musical genre of any sorts at all, could you? He was very eclectic in his taste. Can you kind of give us a sense of how he grew up musically?
Well, he heard classical and other kinds of music in the family. He grew up at a time when singing at parties was still the norm. And he also grew up in a musical culture in Dundee, which is quite often undervalued. But there was a lot of stuff going on when he was at that impressionable late teenage years. There was jazz going on, there was folk, there was pop groups, there was Gus Foy, there was Dougie Martin. There were all these people were playing music. The Average White Band was hanging about. And he just seemed to draw all of that in and transmute it into his own particular magic.
Yeah, and when did he decide, I mean, from all the work with the bands that he was involved with earlier, when did he really make the move to becoming a solo performer?
I think it was when he went down to London when he was about, I think he was in his late teens, early 20s, although he still kept on with the bands, but he was given a record contract and he brought out the Midas Touch. But the second one, they said to him, not too much Scottish stuff. So he presented an entire programme of Scottish stuff, including things like Happed in Mist and General Grant's Visit to Dundee. And the record company didn't like it. So he put it out himself as Gales Blue on the Mink label. And that was about, there must be cracking on for 30 years ago. Yeah. But he did that. And there was something about him. His lyrics, when you listen to them, they're very Scottish. They're very clever, they're very surreal, and I think that kind of sums Michael up. I think what Sheena's saying about Michael had an extraordinary musical facility and a great songwriting craft. He could have made an amazing, I'm sure, financially lucrative living as a commercial songwriter, and I think he chose not to do that because it wasn't meaningful. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just the songwriting, I suppose, that made him tick. And I suppose he found a natural home and ally in the Dundee Rep Theatre. And I'm joined now by Jemima Levick from the theatre. Hi there, Jemima.
Hi.
When did you first come across Michael, and what was his involvement with the theatre?
Well, I first moved up to Dundee in 2009, and Michael was kind of a legend, really, that kind of surrounded the theatre, and he'd worked in the theatre for many years, kind of performing as a solo artist, also working with the women's singing group. He wrote an operetta for them called If the Moon Can Be Believed that they produced long before I had arrived. He was always kind of talked about in a mythical kind of a way, and I first had an opportunity to meet him in 2010 when we approached him to write a play that we would co-produce with the Oran Moor in Glasgow as part of their Play Pie and a Pint series. And he came up with a short story called St Catherine's Day. And I'd never met him before, and I was really anxious about meeting him because, I mean, the way that everybody talked about him, I was kind of a bit terrified, to be honest. And then he arrived, and he was so unbelievably generous and kind. and we talked about this short story that we were going to turn into a stage play. And I mean, it was truly surreal. I mean, absolutely crackers. For some reason, it really worked. And I thought, yeah, actually, we can do this. And so I had the joy of kind of being in a rehearsal room with him for 2 weeks to develop the piece and to put that on, which was fantastic.
Yeah. And Liz, I mean, I'm fascinated to find out, you toured with him, and, touring with somebody, you kind of get to know them better than some of your family because you're in such close proximity all the time. What was it like being on tour with them?
Oh, it's just wonderful. I mean, there's experiences that just can't be taken away from me, of just getting a wee glimpse now and again at Michael's way of just looking at anything. He would just say something, and Frank McConnell was saying to me the other day, you worked with Michael and you loved it and you had the joy of touring with him, but you never knew how he would think. He just would come out with something that surprised you. Yeah. You would think you knew anything worked out, but he would come at things by the own Michael angle. And, I mean, what he says, just in everything that he did, is that we must all just keep working. Lines of his like, never mind your needless moaning, never despair, keep working. I got up this morning and I thought, what can I do? I've got to start writing a poem. So I've started writing a poem called The Optimistic Sound, which is a quote from Michael. And it might not see the light of day, but I'll try. And I'm thrilled that I got to do In Flagrant Delict with him. And why we agreed to do a wee touring show with poems and poetry and song together was, I think he liked the way that it made the poetry audience could hear the poetry in the songs then, just as I loved the way that the song audience, the musical audience, could hear the music inside the poetry. And it was just magic. And it was because he said, I've got a great title for a one-man, one-woman show. Yeah. In Flagrant Delict. And, he gave me a wee kind of laugh, and it was just so wonderful to work with Michael. It's amazing. And, the show that Jemima did with him, St. Catherine's Day, was the last time I saw him on stage. And he was round for his tea, during rehearsals, and that was great. And the songs in that were fantastic. And it was wonderful to watch that show that Jemima did so brilliantly. It was a wonderful, wacky production of a wonderful wee play where you and Donald had to play loads of characters, including a demented nun. It was hilarious. But it was about a cheesy singer that who, in meeting in the touring thing, he one day meets someone who turns him on to singing something beautiful for just once in his life. And when I was sitting with the Oranmore audience, I knew something that not everybody did, which was that Richard Conlon, when it came to singing this song for real, the song Macushla, that there would not be a dry eye in the house. And genuinely there wasn't. Richard Conlon singing Michael's Macushla. I can hear it yet.
We're actually going to hear that song in just a second. Jemima, this is one of the tracks that you've actually selected. What does it mean to you?
I've actually found out, sort of after hearing it for the first time, that it was written to comfort his cousin after the death of her mother. But it was one of the songs, as Liz said, that appeared in St. Catherine's Day. And it was so beautiful. And Michael actually played me his version before Richard kind of took it on and we bedded it into the show. But I remember hearing it and just thought it was so beautiful, completely inspirational, and summed up Michael and his sensitivities so brilliantly that I still listen to it just every now and then. I just put it on just to kind of recapture what I heard the first time, and I think it's a beautiful piece of work.
A young woman dances, a young man adores, catches his breath as she steps to the fore. And an old Dublin head square floats down to the floor as he spies Macushla. Love is forever, yes, love is for aye. No doubt, no question, no wondering why. A clear crystal fountain is shining on high, all to please Macushla. Joey is handsome and Joey is strong. awake this morning with a beautiful song. She had a nightingale singing along as he sang Macushla. Love is forever, yes, love is for aye. No doubt, no question, no wondering why. A clear crystal fountain is shining on high, all to please Macushla. Embrace your lover and take to the floor. Glide through the light like never before. There's no soul in heaven who could have done more than our own Macushla. Love is forever, yes, love is for aye. No doubt, no question, no wondering why. A clear crystal fountain is shining on high, all to please Macushla. A smile on his lips and a light in her eye. Love for I, Macushla.
You're listening to Travelling Folk here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Bruce MacGregor, where we are celebrating the life and work of Michael Marra, who you just heard there with All to Please Macushla. And I'm also joined by Jemima Levick from Dundee Rep, Liz Lockhead, Sheena Wellington and Karine Polwart. Karine, you wanted to say something just about that song?
Yeah, well, I know Sheena was talking about how Michael growing up in an era when house parties were, and singing at parties was still the go. And I was at a party at a pal's house on Saturday, and my pal's 12 and 13-year-old daughters, Holly and Isla, got up and sang that song, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And the whole company sang Hermless as well, and although there's a lot of Michael's songs that are actually bound up with his voice and his phrasing and his own way of delivery, I can't imagine how some of them would be covered by somebody else. There's also these other songs that are just, they could live on other people's tongues, and they're just brilliant, just brilliant songs to be alive in those ways that you'll never know how many parties those songs get sung at.
Yeah. Sheena, just talking about that voice, I mean, how do you describe it for a start?
Well, somebody once described it as gravel stirred in melting chocolate, and I think that's quite a good one. And also, Jim Crumley in his book The Road and the Miles had a couple of worthies talking about Michael Marra. And one of them said, that Michael Marra can't sing. And his friend said to him, aye, just the same way as Louis Armstrong couldn't sing. And it was unique. It was a fabulous, wonderful sound. And I'm still finding it difficult to listen to it without, breaking down.
And we're going to hear a choice from you, Sheena, just now. Tell us what this is.
Well, this is, again, it's Michael, looking at things from a different point of view in the world. It's about a dog. And I was actually struggling to choose a song. And I thought, well, I'll ask and see if anybody in the family has got a special one. And spoke to Jenny Marra, his niece, and said, OK, Jenny, what am I going to sing? And this was her favourite. And I thought, well, that's nice, because family was very important to Michael. That was the centre of his life, particularly Peggy and his children, Alice and Matthew. In fact, Peggy was his rock. He used to say, come on, Sheena, you I'm not allowed anything sharp. You'll have to speak to Peggy about that. And Julius was written for the dog of his very good friend and fellow musician Dougie Martin, who we also lost earlier this year. And poor Julius, who was a lovely sheepdog, never actually got to go to any gigs. So this was the song Julius.
Julius, scraping at the window, Julius, scratching at the door. He sings like an angel, but I wouldn't know. I never saw a real legitimate show. He used to be a poor soul. Now he's on the late night radio. I'm only Julius, barking at the agent, Julius, lying on the floor. I hear them talking about the things that he's done. They say he breaks a woman's hearts with just a flick of his tongue. He says, Julius, he doesn't feel too well. You know he tends to forget. I have a keen sense of smell. I'm only Julius. That love and feeling, cry me a river and a rose in Spanish Harlem. You don't know like I know how the song goes. Safe to sing it in a team-but dress like red coats. You never heard them singing when we're all alone in steamboats. A rainy night in Georgia, all over the world. Spanish Harlem. You don't know like I know. steamer dressed like red coats. They've never heard them singing when we're all alone in steamboats. A rainy night in Georgia, all over the world. A rainy night in Georgia.
Michael Marra there and Julius. I'm just wondering, Karine, just to kind of sum up from your point of view, I mean, how do you sum up Michael Marra and what he means to you and to everyone else?
It was only a few times had some quiet conversations with him, and he said a thing to me once, I might not have it exactly, but we were doing a show together. I was freaking out, and Michael was freaking out because he freaked out at every show that I ever saw him play at. He was like a caged animal before his gigs, and despite that he came up and he said, never allow yourself to feel unworthy of the place that you find yourself in. And to me that's what his songs reek of. They reek of the worth of all the people and the places that he writes about, and he dignifies people in his writing, whether it's through humour or whether it's through sorrowful laments. It's all about dignity of everything, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, how about yourself, Jemima?
He'll be well remembered for all his music and the shows that we did at the Rep, for Mill Davies, for St Catherine's Day. But I suppose the thing for me is just about the fact that he was such a true artist, really. He had such integrity and humour and wit, and all of that was underpinned with just a great wisdom and a brilliant sense of humanity, which I suppose is what the theatre is all about, really.
Yeah. And Liz, what kind of final memories do you have to share with us about Michael?
Well, just the other day at his funeral, one of the hundreds of friends there at his funeral was desperate to tell me the story of when he first met him. And I just felt this said it all. He said to me, Michael just came on and he sat down at the piano and started singing, and he went wordless, and he said, anyway, after he was finished and we were standing together in the wings, well, I was that over the moon. I was just gittering on and on about how knocked out I was. And here the orchestra had started on stage, and he was quite entitled to tell me to shut it. Anybody else would just have said, shut up, it was called for. But no, he just puts his finger to his lips and says, shh, so soft you could hardly hear him, and one word whispered. Yeah. Listen. That was Michael. And that's what I take away from Michael. Listen.
Sheena, how about your own lasting thoughts?
Just the memory of the lad that I knew when he was a bairn, and it seems against nature that he's away and I'm no. And the sort of loving, gentle man of integrity and immense talent that he was. That was Michael. He was ours and we loved him.
Yeah, well, Jemima, Liz, Sheena and Karine, thank you very much for joining us on Travelling Folk tonight. I hope we've brought you some special memories tonight. And Michael, you may be gone, but you'll never be forgotten by the people of Scotland. Thank you. Taking us to the news just now, this is the unofficial anthem of Scotland. From Michael Marra, this is Hermless.
Wi' my hand on my heart and my heart in my mouth, wi' arms that could reach o'er the sea. My feet might be big, but the insects are safe. They'll never get stood on by me. There's never nae bother for me. I ging to the library, I tak out a book, and then I go home for my tea. Save all the coupons that come with the soup, and when I have saved 53, I send awa 50, put 3 in the drawer, and something gets posted to me. There's never nae bother for me. I do what I'm telt and I tidy my room, and then I come down for my tea. There's ane or twa lads wha could cry my chums. They're canny and meek as can be. There's Tamwees pigeons and Wolwees mice, and Robert McLennan and me. There's never nae bother for me. I gang to the library, I tak out a book, then I come home for my